Welcome to Marrow Masters Season 15, sponsored by Kite, a Gilead company, and Bristol-Myers Squibb. The National Bone Marrow Transplant Link, established in 1992, strives to help patients, caregivers, and families cope with the psychosocial challenges of bone marrow and stem cell transplant, from diagnosis through survivorship. Season 15 of our show focuses on CAR T cellular therapy. This innovative and life-saving treatment is gaining momentum and has become a first-line course of treatment in recent years. We will dig in, learning more from clinicians, survivors, a caregiver, a nurse, and a psychologist. This season will offer education, insight, hope, and so much more. Here's your host, Executive Director of the NBMT Link, Peggy Burkhardt.
Hello, everyone. So today we welcome with us Dave and Laurie Brock of Missouri. So Dave is a very recent, in fact, survivor, and Laurie is his caregiver. They're going to share their CAR T story with us today. Welcome, you guys. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So Dave, let's talk about your story.
Okay. Well, to start with, I didn't expect to be here talking about CAR T this morning. I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma in November of 2015. And at that time, I went through a stem cell transplant and all the things that folks might be familiar with stem cell transplant. I've been in remission for 8 years, really good, solid remission.
Okay.
And just recently came out of it. But at the time I went through stem cell 8 years ago, the folks at KU Medical Center and Dr. Abdullah, Dr. Shanae, and you'll hear me sing their praises loud and clear, kept dangling out this CAR T therapy. It was in its infant stage, and it was some kind of future magical thing that they thought was going to be really helpful in the future.
Okay.
And then fast forward to March of this year, I came out of remission, relapsed. And after that relapse, Dr. Abdullah said, hey, you know what? FDA is getting ready to approve this CAR T therapy for folks who were on their second line of therapy. I had only completed one. Everything they had been talking about was some futuristic. I thought it would be years before I would see this. And he said, hey, they're getting ready to approve it. Let's just skip this appointment and reschedule in a couple weeks. And sure enough, FDA approved it for the second line of therapy, and we were a go. It was, all right, this futuristic thing is here. Let's go for it.
And so let's just verify that KU, the name of the center.
It's the University of Kansas Medical Center.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So you were up and running at that point, ready to go.
Yes, ready to go.
What would you say is the most important message that you want to share today with listeners about CAR T?
First off, I would tell folks who are out there with whatever reason you have to do CAR T therapy is to get to a specialist. Again, if I wasn't at KU Medical Center, I don't think I would have been going through it. As I speak, I'm still in my 100 days, but I read some stuff a long time ago from the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation that said get to a specialist. Outcomes are much better. And it shows that chances of being progression-free for a longer period of time increase dramatically when you get to a specialist.
Good advice.
And that actually is what played out here. Again, I said earlier, if I hadn't seen Dr. Abdullah and he wasn't a specialist, and if he had not known that FDA was getting ready and in just a few weeks to approve it, I would be sitting and waiting for it and thinking it was some future.
Wow. And so you're pretty recent. As you said, you're within 100 days. How are you feeling?
I am feeling pretty good. I know the folks listening can't see, but as a result of it, I developed Bell's palsy. So my face is drooping a little and it's getting better.
Can't even notice.
Yeah. But I feel really good.
Good.
Fatigue sets in, but that's kind of typical. And I don't know if that's the therapy or if it's my age, but
I have to tell listeners too that I was on the phone with you, maybe a month ago. You were hiking, 40 plus days since your CAR T cellular therapy, and you were out hiking. That was so encouraging. I just smiled all day about that one.
And that's something I would like to part on folks as well. Before you go into the therapy, get in the best possible physical shape you can get into. not only was I out hiking that day, but I actually hiked 22 miles while in the hospital.
Wow. That's incredible.
It was a lot of laps in a little small wing, but the nurses, other patients got to know me.
Uh-huh.
And Laurie, of course.
Yeah. We're going to get to Laurie in a little bit. Dave, let's talk about the importance of a positive attitude.
Yeah. I brought up when I was diagnosed in 2015, and that was a whirlwind. After the diagnosis, I got thrown in a hospital the day I saw the doctor, and that was a Friday, and Monday I started chemotherapy.
Uh-huh.
Laurie and I were both sitting in the oncology unit, and we asked the nurse, not knowing what to expect, what do we need to do? Well, how do we achieve the best possible outcome? Her response was keep a positive attitude. And being the smart aleck that I am, I said, so all I have to do is smile through this. And she looked at me and shook her head and said, honey, we're going to do things to you that you can't possibly smile through.
Wow.
But what she did say was to take a positive approach to your treatment, and went on to say, listen to your doctors. They're the smartest people in the world. They know what to do with this thing.
Mm-hmm.
She said, talk to the nurses. They know what's going on. In fact, they can guide you through the ups and downs, and they know what's going to happen before it actually happens.
Truth.
And there are lots of funny stories with that, too, where the nurses proved me wrong. But the knowledge is power. Learn as much as you can about the treatments and your scheduled tests. And, you're not the only patient the medical staff has. Just realize that. So you need to know exactly what your treatments are, where they're going, and just share what your concerns are and ask questions.
Uh-huh.
Make it easier for them. And then pay attention to what's going on. Listen and ask lots of questions. That's where I've got a good caretaker. She asks questions all the time.
Oh, lucky you.
Then whatever you need to do spiritually to calm down, whether it's pray or you can't really go to church or do things like that because you're going to be stuck in isolation some. But I found meditation to be very effective. Just calm yourself down. I actually willed my body, told my body, do what you need to do to get better. And one of my meditation exercises back during stem cell anyway was pretending like whatever they did to me was Iron Man, and it was out there attacking this disease. The medical staff at KU called this new CAR T Pac-Man, that it's going to go through your body just eating up these cancer cells. And I like that analogy. And so I would sit and think about that.
Uh-huh.
And keep a positive attitude. Just to remember to be grateful that you're receiving the best care in the world. And then, like I said, just know that hospital staff, they will guide you through all the hoops that you need to jump through, the financial issues, the social issues. We'll talk about it later, the relationship issues, insurance. Just rely on them and don't hesitate to ask for help when you need it.
Oh, Dave, great advice all the way around. I like that image of the Pac-Man just there and eating away all of that bad stuff and getting you ready for the next chapter of your wonderful life. So for a minute, let's talk about some of the challenges during your treatment.
What was interesting is I actually had a stent put in at the same time we were going through all this. A heart stent.
Okay.
And that delayed the CAR T by 3 or 4 months that we really didn't want to do, but had to.
Uh-huh.
So I had to go on bridge therapy and waiting because they were ready to go until they found out the cardiologist had done this. That bridge therapy included raising the dosage amount of the Revlimid that I was on. It also, unfortunately, added dexamethasone, a steroid treatment. And I can tell you, a lot of folks out there listening probably know about Dex. It is an evil, evil drug. I like to classify it when I was on it as being wired and tired at the same time. Mm-hmm. And it just wreaked havoc. I'm type 2 diabetic, and it wreaked havoc on my blood glucose levels.
Yeah.
And Laurie can attest to all of this, and I don't know if she's going to talk about that in her discussion, but we had to separate ourselves from time to time with being on it because the energy levels, I was all over the place.
Sure. It's a necessary evil, right?
Yeah. But it works. It's very effective.
Exactly.
In fact, it was so effective that I began wondering if they were going to even move me to CAR T therapy because all the test scores were coming back
Oh,
a little
interesting.
bit better. And then I tell people, just plan on living at the clinic. We actually even talked about moving closer to the clinic so we could just walk there, but we were there all the time. You're going to get pre and post treatment, lab draws, cell collection for the T cells. I at least had MRI, CTs, brain scans, cardiology, psychology, social workers, you name it, they checked it.
Mm-hmm.
And just know the true sacrifice was that you're going to be quarantined for a period of time because your immune levels are going to be really low. Not being able to see my grandkids who are 8, 7, 6, 5, and 4 right now. So every year, and our medical team calls them little germ factories.
Yep.
So being away from them
Uh,
is extremely difficult. Day 0, when they put the infusion in, that's really kind of anticlimactic. I got admitted to the hospital, and I think from what I've seen, most people will. And they say to plan on 7 to 14 days. But you go in, they shoot the T cells back into you, and it really is really anticlimactic, and you're sitting there wondering, why all this hoopla?
uh-huh.
And then the first 4 days, I was so bored in the hospital. I already told you I walked 22 miles, but staying in that hospital room and being in the wing, it was, 10 laps for 1 mile? So I can do the math, how many laps that was.
A lot.
But then day 5, and man, the I can never say, that's one of the words,
Yep.
get your dictionary out, because the words are going to be hard to pronounce, but the cytokine response really kicked in. At that point, I really couldn't push myself up and out of bed.
Okay.
And when I did get up, I was unstable. They had to label me a fall risk. And I can tell you, for a person whose ego is like mine, that is tough. Really, really tough to have to rely on Laurie, for one, to help me get around, the nurses to get me around.
Mm-hmm.
But for a couple of days, that was a pretty big blow to my ego.
Well, it was temporary, though, right?
Yeah, it was well worth it.
Yep.
And then plan on the constant checking for neurotoxicity. I had to write sentences every 2 or 3 hours.
Uh-huh.
I told the nurses I'm writing a novel here and tried to be a little bit encouraging with it. Just say inspirational things so that staff actually enjoyed it a little bit. Part of that's going to be naming things in the room. They'd point to a clock. What's this?
Uh-huh.
And a door. What's this? And you had to name it all. And luckily I passed all those. And then I got released and thought things were good, but the neurotoxicity kicked in and damaged some nerves in my neck that control your face. And that's where the Bell's palsy comes in.
Okay.
Laurie noticed a little bit of drooping in my face. We called the clinic and they said, get to the ER, and went through a whirlwind of tests, checking for stroke, everything else, and just ruled everything out. Again, admitted me for a night just to watch, put me on steroids again for it. But it meant 2 more days in the hospital. It meant a funny face. And I've talked about my ego before. I mean, having a droopy face, it does attack it. In fact, when I got home, my granddaughter didn't really want to look at me. It scared her a little bit. And the next day, though, she came over and she was making the faces back at me. So I had a little fun with it.
Yep.
And then the fatigue, it is real. It's going to happen. That's why I said be in the best possible shape you can be in. This is, again, where Laurie will explain why she calls herself a care partner. But having them understand when to push, when to hold back, when to say, hey, you need to sit down, you need to rest, or no, you need to get up and move around type stuff. It's really important.
Well, thank you, Dave. So from getting to know you, I understand that gratitude is a big part of your mindset. Let's talk about that. It's so important.
Yeah. It's tough. It really is tough. But then looking at it and actually walking around the hospital, we got to know a couple of patients that were there. And, my experience was relatively easy compared to theirs. And understanding that, I've told the staff a little bit, the survivor's guilt sometimes kicks in. But one of the patients suffered severe neurotoxicity. And the other one had some extreme fatigue and GI issues and all kinds of stuff. So mine was really easy, relatively easy, I should say.
Relatively.
Yeah, we'll ask Laurie about that.
We lived within 30 minutes of the clinic, so we were able to come home. And, it did mean daily trips back to the clinic. And I came to really enjoy those visits because it meant I got out of the house and could do something. But the two patients I just mentioned, they lived outside that 30-minute window, and they had to stay within 30 minutes of the hospital. They had designated lodges and so that they could stay in. And so I'm grateful, again, that I'm that close to the clinic and could do that.
Sure.
Also, the ability to walk 22 miles, that has a positive impact. And I would tell you, and I hope everybody experiences, but the medical staff is absolutely the best. All the way down to the cleaning lady who was asking how I was doing. Is there anything I can do for you? To the people delivering meals, the nurses, the team of doctors that visited every day, their attitude, I had no doubt they knew what they were doing, and they had no doubt that they were going to accomplish what they wanted to. One of the things I believe in, and it's from the habits of successful people, is to keep the end in mind. It's a struggle. We know it's a struggle, but the end of the process has been and proven to be well worth it for me. And then you're going to hear from her in just a few minutes, but man, your care partner, love, cherish them, praise them, because I could not have gone through this without her. I am so grateful for that.
Well, and with that, let's introduce Laurie, Dave's care partner. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you. It's nice to be here with you. We're part of a multiple myeloma support group here in Kansas City, and that has been really important to our entire process the whole time since diagnosis. And one of the members there has changed the idea of caregiver in our mind to care partner, as Dave mentioned, because we are in this journey together. We both need to be aware of each other's needs and tend to them the best that we can. I like this terminology because I've never really considered myself a natural-born caregiver. I mean, I'm an accountant.
Okay.
But I love being Dave's care partner. And if you have a support group in your area, or even try and pick another location, because now we do a lot on Zoom meetings, I'd highly recommend finding one, joining one. Knowledge is power, and honestly, you simply don't know what you don't know about these diseases and their treatments.
Tell us, Laurie, about the responsibility of being Dave's care partner.
Well, Dave mentioned the Dex days. We found it handy, as he mentioned, to have a 2-level house where we could kind of split up. And he could stay up late and do laundry and ironing and cleaning and whatever while I could get my rest.
Oh, good.
Being a CAR-T care partner is a huge responsibility, one that felt heavier to me than during Dave's stem cell transplant 8 years ago. I needed to accompany him to all the pre and post appointments mentioned earlier. We were really lucky that I had just retired a few months before, so I didn't have the added pressure of outside employment. I don't know how people can handle this or go through it when they're still working. So that was a real benefit in our situation.
Sure.
I went to the KU seminar where we went over the CAR-T manual. I read and reread it so that I wouldn't forget or miss important things, such as no open windows in the house, no fresh air, no pets or plants, no shoes in the house. Walking in from outside, they told us how to cook food, what foods to avoid, and you'll need a meat thermometer, just a little aside here. How to clean your house. It's actually different from real life. How to grocery shop. Seriously, how to walk through a grocery store and pick your foods.
Wow.
And how to store foods, how to get them home, ensuring no visitors carry in unwanted germs. You have to figure out how to get them to eat enough protein after treatment. There are so many rules.
I'll say. So, Laurie, my question here for you is, you said it was a heavier, more intense responsibility, for the CAR-T, and just hearing you talk about all of these rules. What was the biggest thing that made the CAR T feel heavier than the transplant 8 years ago?
I had to have eyes on him 24/7. And that meant not even running to the grocery store. So once he got out of the hospital and I brought him home, I could not leave him for any time at all. And that was just incredibly worrisome to me because the neurotoxicity, which they really got us prepared for, because it does happen in quite a few of the cases, is possible and it can hit any moment.
Okay.
And that was probably the weightiest issue. We enlisted the help of a trusted brother-in-law who came over and sat with Dave sometimes so that I could go take care of my appointments. And in one case, I got outside for just a walk. I also needed to quarantine myself to limit the possibility that I'd carried germs into him, as an immune-compromised person may be susceptible. So a couple weeks before treatment even began, I quit going to the gym. I began masking in public places when I had to go out. We isolated ourselves from the kids and grandchildren who were just starting the new school year. And I got caught up on all of my vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of preparation and a lot of things that I had to give up myself in order to just not harm him. So it was pretty intense. You also have to understand that they are going through an awful lot with chemo, steroids, just the process. So I needed to be super supportive and aware of his moods. He couldn't control some of those feelings that were brought about because of chemical reactions. And so it was a lot.
I appreciate your honesty. This is important for people to realize. It's going to be tough, but we're going to get through it.
Right.
And if I might add a little bit here, Peggy.
Sure.
What I would advise a care partner to do is take advantage of the hospital stays. Don't feel like you need to stay in a hospital room the whole 24/7. Get out while you can, because when you get home, you're stuck.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So take advantage of it.
Well, much easier said than done. I will have to interject here.
I think you two might be able to have your own podcast show. So, Laurie, let's talk logistics post-transplant.
Okay, post-transplant. So CAR T patients cannot drive until day 61. So you are their ride as well as a support system. Another thing that was really beneficial, my career in accounting was perfect for designing an Excel spreadsheet to track all the medications and vital stats, which would have been overwhelming without. I highly recommend trying to come up with some kind of graph or paper or something just to keep track of all the medications, make sure they take them at the right times. You log all those stats of temperature, blood sugar data throughout the day. Our bone marrow transplant care team said that they could print something for us, but Dave said probably my accountant caregiver can do just as good a job. And then, oh my goodness, you have to, as I mentioned, watch really closely for any changes in appearance or behavior, both in hospital and at home or in your temporary living arrangements, because it may signal neurotoxicity setting in. You are the one that knows your loved one best, and you will know when something changes before anybody else will.
That is so true. So let's talk about self-care as a caregiver. We've heard how challenging it was, but I know you had to have tried to do that.
I tried to do that. I'm not the best at that anyway. But yes, you need to take care of yourself. There are no two ways about that. So even if it's not a comfortable place for you to be, you just have to make the effort in all these ways, physically, mentally, spiritually. You need to get good sleep, try to be active, eat well. It's not easy. As Dave mentioned, he would prefer, I think, that I not spend time at the hospital and do something on my own, but it was hard for me to justify getting outside when I might contract some kind of germ or bacteria. So it was difficult. It was a very difficult balance for me to strike, but we got through it. So
great. So gratitudes. Let's hear your list, Laurie.
This first one might kind of surprise you. For 30 days, the first 30 days, you are forced to be together with almost no other people around unless you're in the hospital. And even then, there are a lot of times in the room, the hospital room, where it's just the two of you. And we were starting to get a little concerned. It was a daunting prospect thinking of just the two of us for 30 solid days.
Uh-huh.
But we found ourselves drawn closer as we worked puzzles together, watched a favorite few fun television shows. And aside to that is find some funny television shows. Or we found an old George Burns and Gracie Allen show from, I don't know, the 40s or 50s. And we just got so tickled watching those. And it was a great way to be able to laugh together. And we both agree our relationship is stronger than when we started CAR-T. And we feel like we used the time to our advantage. We talked a lot. We talked relationship issues. We talked future goals, dreams, trips, things like that. One of my favorite after treatment days was day 31. So we went into the clinic to get the results, where we knew immediately the doctor and the nurse came into the room dancing, literally dancing.
Really? Oh.
He's getting choked up right now.
It's okay. Oh, that's wonderful.
And I think it's important while she's trying to get her composure together to realize at that point, you realize the doctor and the nurses and the medical staff are as emotionally invested in this as you are.
Absolutely. His doctor came in and gave him a big hug. And then she turned to me, and I never wanted to quit hugging her. It was just, she was so thrilled for us, and we were so thrilled. And I will never forget that day.
Wow.
I've been reflecting on this recent journey, and a quote that I can't source comes to mind. The days are long, but the years are short. So we have been invited by David's doctor. She came in and said, go live your life. And that will be with me for the rest of our lives. And due to the miracle of CAR-T, we intend to do just that.
Now you got me crying. Oh, Laurie, that's so perfect. Woo. Okay, so we're going to get ready to wrap it up. Any closing remarks? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, day 30, they throw out this day 30, and you think you're over with it. But, man, it just included more tests, see what happened, what the effect was. And Laurie already talked about the results, my results anyway, the dancing doctor and nurse. Man, that just says it all, that it was worth it. I'm in complete remission now, again. But now, at least what I'd like to do is, because this is fairly new process for at least second line of therapy, I realize I'm somewhat of a guinea pig. In fact, a few of the doctors in the hospital have said that we are learning with you on this. They are looking at changing procedures and everything else based on whatever they learn from me and anybody else that's going through this. I want to take the time to thank anybody that's going through a clinical trial.
Yes.
Or anybody that's participating in sharing their data. It means something to all of you out there. With that, treatments are going to improve. Procedures are going to improve. So thank you again, everybody out there. And if you participated, even if you're just going through it and your data is out there, you have been helping me get through this whole process, and anybody else. I want to quote Dr. Shanae, Laurie just quoted, who said, go live your life. You are free to live. And I just kind of want to say I'm more than 60 days into this. I'm feeling better all the time. Haven't quite yet completely recovered, but I'm getting there. I know it. I know I am. And then I want to thank the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link for allowing us to share our stories. One other fun story of mine is I was walking into the clinic during the COVID years just for my routine visit. And some grumpy old man was there complaining about having to wear a mask and all the new procedures of you couldn't have anybody go in with you, just all the new COVID procedures. And he was as grumpy as he could be to the receptionist. And I'm telling you, this little old lady, she couldn't have been more than 5 feet tall, got in his face, shaking a finger and said, "Hey, buddy, we're all in this together. Get over it. Knock it off."
Good.
So that's why we're here today. Again, I want to thank the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link for allowing us to share our story with a lot of different people. It is important.
Thank you.
I can't overemphasize that. We're all in this together.
Absolutely. And we thank you because you make it real. You just shared your hearts and your souls and your story. And we can't thank you enough. This is going to help so many people just feel better about the whole experience. And Dave, one thing I wanted to add to your clinical trial comment, I had a doctor, I believe it's this season, say every drug that is out there, every single drug, every single treatment is because of clinical trials. And if we do not have the people to participate in them, we will not have the advances that we are all getting to experience, especially in the last 5 years.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you both. You're fantastic. And I want to stay in touch, Dave, and see and hear how you're doing. I just know everything's going to be great and you're going to get out there and go live your life.
Yep.
We are. Thank you for the opportunity. We really appreciate this.
This has been the Marrow Masters podcast. If you know someone who would benefit from the information in our show, please share this episode with them. And don't miss future episodes of our show. Follow Marrow Masters for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now. And to connect with the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link, visit nbmtlink.org or tap the link in our show notes.